Hi, welcome to ArtC. I'm your host, Bill Horn. My guest today is Long Beach Island artist and vlogger, Gwenn Seemel. Gwenn, welcome to ArtC.
Bill, thanks for having me.
You recently wrote something that I found very interesting, and it was, if you want to feel good about your art, you need to find a structure. So can you explain that?
It came in the context of a whole blog series that I'm doing right now about how to love your art. 17 tips for loving your art to celebrate my 17 years as a professional artist, which I am celebrating in May. And there's a whole slew of them that are really more emotional, like that one. And then there's some more like practical, business-oriented ones. And so there I was just trying to encourage artists to think about how their art is structured. We have this idea that art is this free-flowing sort of a thing, the throwaway class, right? In college, people take art just to like get a good grade and bring up their GPA. But art actually does have structure. The only difference is that unlike in maybe some other industries, the rules that we have in art can be broken. You can decide which ones you care about and which ones you don't. So my point was to encourage artists to figure out which rules they care about, whether that's like a content rule, like they're never going to make art about a certain subject because they don't want to offend an audience. Content rules are really variable based on like who you're showing your work to. Or maybe it's a style rule, you're only going to do abstract work, or you're only going to do, whatever other kind of style. Hyperrealism is a good example of when you're thinking about rules in art, because it is so cut and dry. Not so cut and dry, nothing ever is, but it's very easy for the audience to say, does that look photorealistic or not?
I know when I taught photography, one of the things I used to tell my students is, it's okay to break the rules, but you have to know the rules before you break them. Because a lot of people will just go into a craft like art or photography, and they'll totally ignore all the rules without even knowing what the rules are. And I think that does reflect in their art. And I kind of got that from what you were writing.
I want people to feel that freedom that is art. So I think it's okay to break the rules, but like you said, like it's interesting to know them, whether or not you care about them or any of that. Learning about them, maybe not right away. It doesn't have to be the first thing you do. I don't want to say that everyone has to go to school and follow a very prescribed sort of path to becoming an artist, but it can be a good thing at some point to learn them and realize where you fit into the larger narrative of art as well.
I have to tell you, I love your vlogs. I think they're interesting. They're really well done. How long have you been vlogging, and what made you decide to start doing that?
It's been about 10 years now. And originally it was about laziness, because I wanted to have a French version of my site. I'm French American. I have a lot of family in France still, but I hate writing in French. I've gotten better over the years, but at the time I was so nervous about making wrong spellings and all of that. And so I thought, I can speak in French a lot more easily than write. So I'm going to start making videos so I can just talk out my French and instead of having to write it in my blog. And then from there it evolved, and I realized that people enjoyed seeing the person behind the work that they were liking.
I'm going to be showing some of the vlogs throughout this interview, and some of the ones that are very powerful, I think, are the ones that are based on one word, like validation or sensitivity or hubris. And one of the ones, validation, is going to be the first one we show. Can you introduce that?
Right about now, validation is something that we are all seeking. We want to understand our place. Humans are social creatures. We need to feel like we are recognized by other humans. So I think it's a good one to show right about now.
Guilty. Lots of artists I know feel ashamed for needing outside validation for their art. They hate themselves just a little bit for loving the likes and the followers and the feedback and the comments and the sales and the grants they get for their art and any other opportunity. They have this idea that they shouldn't need any of that in order to feel like a real artist, that they should just know that their art matters. But I'm here to say that I think that needing validation is completely normal. When I look at the world around me, at the artists I know and at everybody else I know, all I see is a bunch of human beings needing validation, needing to know that their community acknowledges their contributions to that community. That's what validation is. And it's a lot easier for people who aren't artists to get validation. Validation generally comes from what society has decided is the right way to live. You know, like having a respected career in a respected field. Well, artists don't have that because art is not respected. And then there's things like having 2.5 children and marrying someone of the opposite sex and being a homeowner and having a car and things like that that are on this like list of boxes that you're supposed to check. And a lot of people who aren't artists, they check those boxes, but a lot of artists, they don't check that first box of the right job, and then they don't check a lot of the other boxes as well. It's just part of what being an artist is. We don't, you know, follow standards very well necessarily. And so it's not really any surprise that artists need some other form of validation. The people who are checking all those boxes, they're getting reinforced all the time by all of our media and just the people around you. Like, all of it says, like, yeah, you're doing the right thing. Artists aren't getting that. And so they need that more personal kind of validation of people actually looking at what they're doing and caring about it. This is a drawing of me as a kid, so like 30 years ago, and at the time I remember feeling like I was special. Like I had all these ideas about who I was and who I could be, but all of that was just when I was by myself. As soon as I was around other kids or anyone else, I immediately felt less confident in who I was, much more vulnerable. And that continued into my adult life today, even it continues. And it's just part of my psychology and things that have happened to me. And I used to feel like it was a really bad thing, something that I should be ashamed of. But really, I've realized that it's not. I care about what other people think of me. And it's okay. It actually means that what I care about is my community. Obviously that can go too far, but generally speaking, don't we want people in our community who want the community to do better, who are aware of their place in it and aware of what the community might need and trying to contribute to it? I guess what I'm saying is that needing validation isn't something we should feel guilty about. It's something we should feel glad about for ourselves and for our communities. If you want to know every time I publish new art or blogs, sign up for my special mailing list. You can support my creativity on Liberapay or Patreon, and you can follow my art on Instagram or Facebook.
You once said words can take power away from images, but they can also give it back. Can you explain that statement?
So, as I was beginning as an artist, I encountered the work of two famous artists, Louise Bourgeois and Renee Magritte. So Bourgeois is known for those huge sculptures of spiders that she does, but her work is varied. She has lots of different figurative but sort of abstract sculptures, as well as these intense and very intimate drawings. Magritte is probably better known. He's a very famous Belgian surrealist. Lots of almost plain images. He didn't really care about painting the technique of painting. He cared about making these strange juxtapositions in his images. And what I realized when I saw their work was that I saw a lot of crossover between these two artists. Like they were making a lot of imagery that seemed to me to be coming from the same place. But then when I would read their writings, they'd be talking about completely different things. And I was disappointed by that because I was like, oh, before I had this writing involved in it, I saw this connection and I was enjoying it. And then once the writing was involved, I was sort of taken away from my experience. And I really resented that as a 20-something just starting out figuring out my art. So I had a lot of baggage around words and art, visual art. And then at some point, probably I wrote a thesis about these artists, for example. At some point along the way, I realized it is important, though, for an artist to say things about their work, because if they don't, someone else will assign words to their images. So you might as well, open your mouth and talk about something that you love, unless you're okay with everybody else assigning meaning to it and words to it. So words and visual art do have this really special relationship, I think.
It's funny, I have friends that tell me that when they're at openings and someone walks up and they're explaining their work to them, and one friend said, he just sits there and nods, he goes, oh my God, you nailed it, that's exactly what I was thinking. by the way, you should buy this piece. You understand this piece. You should really buy it. So, and you're right. People do like to read into the art what they think without the artist having any say in that. You've lately been creating, or you have created, an animal alphabet book, which is really cool. I looked at some of the images you have going into it. How did that project get started? Were you commissioned to do that project?
That project kind of started in 2012, actually. I did a book of animal images. They were all animals who in some way deviated from our traditional notions of gender and sex. So animals in which the female is larger than the male, for example. And it was meant for the kid in all of us, that book was. And as soon as I put it out, everyone was like, oh my God, I want you to do an alphabet book for my kid. And I had just done 56 paintings of animals for this book in 2012. So I was like, yeah, I'm not in the space to do that right now. Fast forward to last year, and I was making a bunch of really pointed political art and getting a lot of pushback for it, a lot of negative response, a lot of positive, but a lot of negative as well. And I was feeling pretty downtrodden by that negative stuff. And I was like, you know, now is the time that I want to be doing an alphabet book. Now I am ready to have this really joyful project at the forefront. And to make it even more joyful, I decided to make it as a collaboration with my audience. So I didn't choose the animals that represent each of the 26 letters. It was my audience that chose them. I did a crowdfunding so you could purchase the right to commission a particular letter. You could also purchase the right to have your child's name embedded into the painting. So, you know, like the name Bella would appear in the B is for Bunny Rabbit painting, for example, if you wanted. So the idea was that this book was really a collaboration between me and my audience.
Has that book been published yet, or are you still working on it?
Not yet. So I have, I don't even remember where I'm at now, but I have more than half of the letters done. I expect it to come out in June, July.
I saw one of your, I think it was in a vlog that you mentioned the word solastalgia, or you talked about the word solastalgia. Can you explain what that is and why you were talking about it?
So solastalgia is a new word that was made up by this guy, Glenn Albrecht. He's an environmental science person. I think he's Australian. And it's meant to describe the distress that we feel over our changing environment, over global warming, essentially. And side note, funny thing, so I made a whole video called Solastalgia, sort of inspired by this man Albrecht's work, and making paintings about my solastalgia. And he found it on YouTube and emailed me to let me know that he loved the work that I had made based on this word that he had coined. So that's a fun little, that's I guess my favorite celebrity endorsement that I've ever gotten, even though it's totally not something that most people have never heard of Albrecht's work. So, but for me, it's very important. I wanted to make art inspired by that word, solastalgia.
How often do you vlog these days?
Definitely have pulled back from vlogging. I was doing it once or twice a week for many years, and I pulled back starting in September of 2019. I was feeling resistant to having my content on platforms that were not my own. I wanted all of my content on my own website, and I cannot support the videos myself. They're always embedded from somewhere else. So that was a choice that I was making. Also, I was hearing from a lot of my audience, some of whom are hard of hearing, that they wanted more written content. So I was responding to supporters of my work and what they were looking for. But I do still do it. I think it's still important to do that, to have that connection. I think that seeing another human being is a nice thing. So.
I'm glad you're doing that. In fact, we're going to end the show today with the vlog about COVID-19. So if you could just introduce that one before I actually end the show.
I was struck by a need to make a video to mark this strange time in our lives. I really wanted to make sure that I had a document of myself remembering when this wasn't normal, because I am very afraid that this new COVID-19 reality will become too normal too soon.
Thanks, Gwen. I'm glad you could be here today, if not in person, but virtually. This has been ArtC. I'm Bill Horn. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for Gwen's video.
It's not that I think that there's something morally wrong with enjoying art in a time of pandemic. Far from it. I am losing myself more than ever in books, and my partner and I are slowly rewatching The Office, the show The Office, and dissecting what makes each of its characters so lovable. Art is providing much-needed momentary escapes for all of us, and that's part of what I love about it. Still, I'm having trouble with creating new stuff right now, because although I make art in response to my world, it's a slow response, which I put together only once I get a handle on my feelings. In the pandemic present, time drags while simultaneously seeming to accelerate, and it's hard for me to get a handle on anything, let alone make something of it. I know that I'll find my stride soon enough, just as soon as I get used to the texture of a culture driven by COVID-19, and honestly, that bothers me. So I am making this video to remind myself of what this time feels like.